And so typically what I'm going to show you, this demo would be in our self-paced course, something similar, probably more like this on steroids actually. And we would probably spend a week building all this out. And I'm going to show you this in like 15 minutes. So it's really like a super crash course to get you interested and maybe looking to start your career in C# and .NET development. Or maybe if you feel like you're at a crossroads and you need to learn something new, this should give you a good idea of like, what should I check into? So I think it's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. First things first, before we jump into that, what's in your water bottle today?
I got some cold water, man.
You went straight up water today. Water. So did I. I went with what's on
straight up water.
It's literally what's on the bottle. It just says coldest water, and I have coldest water today. No tea today. So yeah, if you want to check out coldest water, you can. They have their competition still running down in the description below. 10% off CF10 coupon. You can go and check them out. We would very much appreciate it.
Coldest water. So if you need in the market for a water bottle, I think this is one of the good ones for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I've been using mine for a bunch now, and I do like it. I genuinely do use it even out of here. So one more thing before we jump into our topic too. Florin just became a channel subscriber. He's now
okay, cool. Let's show him on the screen here.
That's great. I can't. It doesn't come up. It doesn't come up in. It doesn't push across to vMix.
Oh, okay.
So I can't put it up.
Okay.
This is Florin. So Florin, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot. And so if you've got questions, put them in chat. Kevin will queue them up. If you need something that's a burning question and you want to guarantee an answer, because there's a lot of people here, then just hit the super chat button. We appreciate it. And buy me and Kevin some tacos, and we'll answer your question. So.
Yeah, definitely. And Nelson just says, hey guys, appreciate your content. It helped me to get myself a software development internship, which is difficult to get. I found from South Africa. That's awesome. Thanks,
All right, cool. From South Africa. Awesome.
We had a few guys from South Africa. You guys should network. Join the Discord server and network and see if there's others from South Africa. Somebody mentioned last week on one of our streams from South Africa. Right. So yeah, you guys have a good little dev community there, I think. It's cool. I like it.
Yeah, I think our Discord channel is going to be 1,000 members and maybe even going over that by now. It was like a few 992 or something like that last time I checked. Yeah, which was this morning. So we're probably just below 1,000 still. So if we can push it over 1,000 today, that'd be awesome. Yeah, you want to join Discord? That's cool.
We'll give a book away on Discord. Maybe we should do that.
Yeah, we'll do that.
We haven't given a book away on Discord, I don't think. So we can go do that.
Okay.
Maybe we'll do that. I'll pick somebody at random. Once we hit 1,000, I'll random pick somebody. And we'll give away a book.
That's it. Let's do that. Cool. Signed copy of Breaking the Code. So that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, cool. I like it.
All right.
Okay, so let's jump into our topic. You're gonna give us an awesome demo, which I'm excited.
I'm always excited to watch. Live coding, is always an adventure. So like hopefully I can do it. So we'll see. All right. So what I'm going to show you is Visual Studio. I'm just going to cut over there, and so I'm going to use in Visual Studio, and this is Visual Studio 2019. And what I'm going to do is just show you how to build a new project using C#. And I'm going to show you the power of which we can do this with. So I'm going to hit File, New Project. And what this allows me to do is I'm going to build a web application with ASP.NET. And next. And I'll give it a call, and we're going to call it Address Book Demo.
Hey, while you're doing this actually too, let's just address this one thing right here. So Steven says new to coding, currently using Visual Studio Code. So very interested in this presentation. So can you just tell me the difference between Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio? Because they are two different applications, right?
Yeah, so VS Code is going to be your code editor. So like JavaScript, and you have to put a lot of extensions in it to kind of build it out. Visual Studio is probably like the bigger brother of VS Code. It is also your code editor. It's your IDE. It's integrated with the debugger. It has the web server built in. So there's a lot more tooling and things around building web applications, whereas VS Code is meant to be a lightweight editor that's also extensible, where you can add things like live server. Here, you don't have to do anything. You just install the product, and it does pretty much everything, as you'll see.
Yeah, I think Microsoft confused everybody by using similar naming, Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. It's just confusing.
Right. And so a lot of times, if I'm editing an HTML file or a JavaScript file or CSS file, I'll do that in VS Code. And then when I'm editing my back-end code in C#, I'm in Visual Studio doing that.
I've seen you work on the same project using both applications.
At the same time. Yeah, exactly. So, which is fine. I mean, I think it's fine. You can open up the solution in both of them and then it works just fine. So like, we're going to go after model view controller. We may talk about in another scenario of like all the different ways that you can build .NET projects, and that includes React, that includes Angular, and there's two types of web application projects right now for what I call post-back projects. Now, this is going to be like a post-back project, which means that I have a form and pretty much all of my information from the front to the back is done through a form, and I submit those forms, and that's how my controllers get this information. These two projects function very similarly in that they're all built around forms. It's just one, it has a newer design pattern around MVVM, and I'm still using MVC model view controller because I think that's more adopted in the industry than this one. And so we still teach this in the boot camp.
The top one there's the Razor Pages one I see. So that's that.
Yeah, the Razor Pages one. And so like, but I think this is more in demand right now than this one. This is newer. Okay. So that's why we teach it. The other thing too that I'm going to build right away is I'm going to go ahead and set this up to be a secure web application. So like if you're not used to securing your web application and you don't know how to do that, this is built in and allows me to build something called ASP.identity, which allows me to have a login page, and it's going to create all that functionality for me. You also can definitely extend that as well. And so this is just pretty much all I need. We do have Docker support, but I'm not going to do that today. That's more for deployment.
But that's built in, though, right? I can just add that. I check that box, and that then just allows me to deploy it to a non-Windows hosted, or the ability to push it out to a non-Windows hosted computer, right? Okay.
Yeah, so basically you compile your app into a Docker or a container, and then you publish the container to the host.
Right.
So well supported out of the box means it can run anywhere. So you can see right away, this thing did some stuff for me, and I'm going to run this app now. And you can see I just hit it, and then it's firing up an instance of ISS Express, which is Internet Information Server. And so like that is my web server that's built in. So I didn't have to do anything about the web server. And I also now have this kind of complete functioning app when it comes up, when it compiles for the first time. And you can see I've got my address book demo. I've got a home page. I've got a privacy page. I've got a login page.
It's kind of small.
Is it blowing up? All right,
yeah,
we'll make it bigger.
Yeah, just increase the size a little bit. Just a little bit small. There we go.
And see now you can see I've got my login page. I've got a registration page. So this thing out of the box is set up for security, a secure web application in mind, and I didn't have to do anything.
See, I think this is some Harry Potter magic stuff. Like, because seriously, you've done nothing. You've literally done file new project and hit run. And that's exactly it. And I'm like, I remember the first time I saw this, and I'm like, I am shocked that you get this straight out of the gate. Like it has like sign in page built in. You have a welcome page. All your folder structure's already there.
It is. So let's go through the folders real quick. So in Model View Controller, we have this thing called Separations of Concerns. And so you can see here, if you look at, this is where that learn about, and this is that home page that we have built. So this is just HTML, no functionality in here, but that's attached to a controller. And the controller has methods that get called that renders this view. That's this right here. And so in MVC, the reason this is important, and I think a lot of people need to understand this, is that I'm not rendering web pages per se. What I'm doing is I'm building out a controller that takes requests from the browser, and then that in turn will render the view for me. And so that means I can enforce security on the back end before the request is round-tripped back to the browser. I also have this concept of data that's already built in here. And what this is doing is going to build me out a connection to my database here. And that's already built for me. And then I have this concept of migrations. And that's the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually build out the database. And then we're going to add to that database and just show you kind of how quickly we can do this. So I'm going to get my new kit, my package manager console, and then I'm just going to say add migration. And a migration is a set of SQL statements that is going to be ran. So I'll call it address book. And it's a little bit small, but that's okay. I'm just giving it a name. I can name it whatever I want. And it's going to do that. And see, now what it's doing is, if you look in here real quickly, it started creating SQL for me to build my tables out. And so you don't have to understand this SQL or anything like this, but this SQL is going to build some tables for me to store my user accounts in. And then to get that into the database, which I'm going to use SQL to do this because that's what's built in out of the box. I just run update database. So now, once this is done, I'm going to show you something. So now, not only do I have a web server in here, but I also have my ability to look at my database server built in to here. And so now you can see here I have this local DB, and I'm going to have a bunch of databases in here. But you can see here's that demo one that we just called it. And if I look in here and look at my tables, you'll see kind of it's building my ASP.NET roles and users. And there's a lot to know about this, and we go through that in depth in our class. But what I want to show you today is out of the box, it has thought through the security end of my website for me. And that, to me, is really cool. We could stop there, Kevin, but like, I don't think that's really good enough. I mean, I think we should do some more stuff, right?
See, I think that's super impressive. So I remember when I did a development class and I did PHP, I had to build out my entire database separately on its own. All of its schema, everything. I did everything. And then you link the two together. So this is what impresses me about this. You write the code and it like builds the database for you based on your code logic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy.
And it's just building it for me. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Maybe that'll help us out a little bit. So what I'm going to do in here, MVC also has the concept of the M, which stands for Model View Controller. And a model is basically the shape of your data. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called Code First, and I want to write some classes, and then I'm going to allow Visual Studio to make the database for me. But then I'm also going to use this model at which I can store data in between the database and the view itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add something called a class. And I'm going to go hit add class here. I think I did it right. And I'm just going to call this person. Okay. Now, since we're building an address book, I'm going to make a class which will hold an instance of a person. So it's not plural, it's singular. We always name classes or models in the singular right here. And so now I have a person class, and I need to know kind of what I'm going to track here. So I'm going to create a public int, and since this is going to a database, I'm going to call this ID, and every field or every table that you create inside of a database should have a field, an ID, which would be the primary key. And once we make that, we call it ID so that, when it gets generated, it knows what it's going to do. And it'll go ahead and automatically make this a primary key unique index because
so
we called it ID.
You didn't even have to tell it that. It just knows that because you've called it ID, that it's going to make it the primary key. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So then I'll make something called first name. I'm going to type a couple things in here. And of course, I live in the U.S., so my address book's going to be U.S. centric. So if you're somewhere else and y'all have different ways of tracking address books, that'll be for maybe if we release this to the public, our V2 after we get our funding, Kevin, for our address book company.
There you go.
And so what I'm doing is I'm just typing some properties up, and these would be the properties that I want to store information in. This is just how I would describe an address book. So I'm going to make also a string, and this is what type of data is in it, and I'm going to say address. And then in the US, huh?
You have an extra S.
What'd you say?
You have an extra S in address.
Yeah.
So addresses.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And of course, in the US, in our postal system, we'll have typically 2 lines, and this could be like an apartment or a suite or something like that, in addition to the actual physical street address that that you're going to. And we have obviously the city that we're in, so that the mail can find us. Not that we actually mail letters to people, but sometimes we still do.
Do we?
Not really. I haven't written a letter in a while.
It's been a minute.
We also have another way to qualify an address in the U.S. is a state, and so we got to have a state so that the mail carrier can get to us, and we also need a zip code, which describes pretty much our mailbox. So zip code. And then finally, I'm going to get some other information that I want in my address book, maybe a string, and we'll call this mobile phone. Though I don't know why we call them mobiles. It's just phone at this point.
That's true.
Most people just have their mobile, just their phone.
Is that common around the rest of the world for you guys too? Did everybody get rid of their home phones in a lot of countries?
I don't know. I think in most places it's always been mobile or wireless.
Yeah, if you still have a home phone, like a landline phone, put it in chat.
Landline. And finally, I'm just going to make like an email address. And so this is my little standard little address book's very simple. I don't know if we can raise VC money off this one.
Probably not.
Kevin, we can try though.
Maybe. Maybe it comes pre-published with Hollywood stars details.
Exactly.
That's how we sell
something like that. We sell the data. So now I have this class, and that's it. I mean, so like, what do I do with this? So this is going to be the shape of my database, but I want it to actually kind of create the tables for me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and do this. And this is where the magic starts happening. I'm going to add what we call a new scaffolded item. And I'm going to create an MVC controller with Fuse using the entity framework. Now, the entity framework is our ORM, which stands for Object Relational Mapper. And this is our pretty much the data access layer that's built into this. So think about this when we're setting up other kind of projects. We'd have to come up with a view engine. We have to come up with a route engine. We have to come up with our back end, like our controller type methodology. We have to come up with our security, and we also have to come up with our ORM. So that's a lot of stuff just to get a full stack web project working, whereas Visual Studio allows me to kind of create this with it all built in for me. So all the plumbing and infrastructure and all that thing's there for me to build things. So inside of here, I'm going to pick that class that it's going to build off of. And look at this. I'm going to pick person because it already knows to look in that models folder for me. Yep. And I'm going to pick person. And then because I set up my database already when I created my identity, now I have a hook to my database. So this tells it what database to put this thing in or connect to when it runs. And look at this, Kevin. It pluralized it.
Oh, there you go.
And so that's why you make it singular, because the singular is references an instance of a person, but the controller would bring back one to many, so it's always going to pluralize your controllers, and it called it people. Notice it didn't say persons, it did people. So it's actually pretty smart when it looks at what you name stuff.
Yeah, that is smart.
Yeah. Just a side note. So now I still haven't, I wrote a little bit of code for my public class. So like while this is doing it, what you're doing when you're building an app in Visual Studio for building an MVC app is you're basically going to build out all of your classes first, then you scaffold the items that you want, and then you create a brand new database. And that's how what code first development is. Whereas before all this stuff, you would kind of build out your database first and then kind of connect to it. This allows you to do it in a code first approach.
Yeah, this is killer.
So so now it wrote a controller for me. So now I can accept requests. You can see here, and this is a little bit more in a 15-minute demo, a lot to explain, but basically it's injecting what my database connection needs to be. And I don't have to worry about that because that's stored somewhere else in the app. This thing just says, okay, I'm going to get a handle on the current database. And that's abstracted away from the controller. So we have this really broad separation of concerns. What this allows me to do, and we do this in Coder Foundry, is this is an abstract thought. And sometimes we'll start out with SQL and then we'll move it over to Postgres, but I don't have to go change my code everywhere. I go change how this context is created. I change it there and then my code just works everywhere. And so it really doesn't care what the database is. And that's why we use objects like this person object, which I just created over there, to communicate, because it's not tied to the database per se, but this context allows it to be kind of mapped over there. So it's kind of cool. So so now that that's done, I can go back to, let me show you something real quick. I can go back to my package manager, and I'm going to add this new tables to my database. So right here in the package manager console, I'm going to add another migration. And this is kind of the reason I did it twice, is just to show you kind of how this works. And you can call these whatever you want. So I called it add person table, boom, and it's going to create a migration. Now what it's doing that's really smart is it's looking at what was built before and what is the new stuff that I got to build now. And you can see now in this, and it's keeping up with all these files as my database grows and builds, as I build things over time, so that I can recreate the database either from the beginning or at any step along the way. And I just go update database. It's kind of cool, right? So if I go view my my SQL Object Explorer, you can see now my address book demo here as this comes up. I need to allow access. You can see now I should have a bunch of new tables in here. Let me refresh it. It should anyway. And so now you can see I now have that person table. And it's got my columns in here. And you notice it created, this thing is now a primary key. It did that automatically for me.
Yep.
Look in here, that's my PK person. Primary key is on the ID column. It's kind of cool.
Definitely.
So it did all that for me. So it created my database. So now this is taking the mystery out of it, but when we run it, you'll see what I'm talking about. So I don't have any links here. So let's go ahead and add a link here to get to our address book functionality that it's built out. So one quick thing is I'm going to change in the view here, the layout page. And this being their shared layout page. And let me just slide that off to the side so you can see kind of what we're doing.
This is just straight up HTML with Bootstrap.
Straight up HTML. And I'll go in here and you can see I got a couple of links in here. I'm going to copy a link. Command C. And I'm just going to tell it what controller it is. And I need to know that, but we know that it's called people because I saw it when it got created.
Right.
And inside my people always going to have an index, like that's the default page. So now I can run this thing.
You left it called home, by the way.
Oh yeah, it'll have two names.
It'll just say
I'll change it. We'll just kill it so it doesn't confuse people. And that's just the name. My address
Princess is asking, is MVC free?
Yep.
So this whole application is free. Yes.
Yeah, Visual Studio is. I'm using Community Edition. It's free. You can build it. Typically, what happens is you pay to have it hosted somewhere, whether that be Heroku or Azure or AWS, whatever you're doing. And so now I have this address book. Check this out. If I did everything right, I'm gonna make this maxed out here. I've got this list that's going to show up in here.
See, not only do you have a view with the list, but you actually have a form to fill it out. You didn't make this.
I didn't make it. You know, this is not. I'm not lying, Kevin. This isn't like David Copperfield stuff where it was like I did it beforehand. I didn't make this. This all got generated for me. So I can put the Coder Foundry address in here. And of course, you know, we're in Kernersville, the tech capital and country music capital of the world.
I like it.
Now I don't have any drop downs and I can do all those kind of things.
Yeah, there's no validation or anything on this at this point. This is just straight out of the box. It's
a 5-minute demo. I'm not going to give out my mobile phone. I got enough calls as it is.
Yeah, right.
And if you want to join the Discord server, you can hit us up at info@coderfoundry.com. Create. Look at this. Now, this is in the database at this point. It did a save to the database.
Right.
And also have an edit, which I can go back in and I can change this to junior and hit save. It's going to take me back, and you can see now it's changing that data. So this isn't like a local storage trick, Kevin, or some kind of cookie.
Right.
This is actually going to the database. And so like we can actually show you that.
You can imagine how powerful this could be then when you're building out an application. If you just you know, to get the bare bones together. If it's a CRUD app that you're building, which is essentially what this is, it's like,
yep.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I could build this like with very little knowledge.
It's pretty cool.
Like,
so I'm going to view the data here right in here in SQL, and you can see now I have a row in here, and this is my database row stored in here, and it's got an ID column. So that's kind of cool, right?
Right.
So if I go back over here,
here's a good point, and we do know this, Ben. There's no validation limitations on what can put in those fields, potentially sent to the database. Correct. You could SQL injection in this stuff right now, but
no, you can't SQL inject this. It's not going to do that.
Because it comes out of the box, doesn't it?
REM. So if I put a slash or something in there, it's not going to execute code. It's still kind of, but we do need to pay attention to that.
Right. But it is somewhat secure.
We can validate all this stuff. Yeah. So in other words, I don't think he'll be able to like store a string in there. So, you know, but you can validate data coming in for sure. So we'll just put you in here as well. Sorry, Chrome is already saving it for me.
That's cool.
Just to show you kind of like what we need to do here. And we'll create another one. And so now we have 2 records in here. And if you go back to our database view, and I think I can just refresh it here. Close it out. I should have just viewed data.
Yeah, there was a refresh.
So now we have two rows in there. And notice that the reason I brought this up in the database, notice it's incrementing our ID behind the scenes. You know. So of course, as Ben brought up, we would have to like build out validation, all those kind of things. And that's easily done with things that we can do on our models itself, as well as validation on the server side. So let's look at where this really happens, and then we'll just get back to some questions here in a second. So I'm going to kill the app here and just look at like what's going on. So in the people controller, this is an index, and it returns context person.async, and then it creates that JSON and returns that JSON to the view. And then our view takes that JSON and puts it in the view engine. All right. So if you're used to React or something like that, this is similarly doing our binding, but because it's type safe, it knows what fields and properties belong to person, and then that person view has a handle to the type of data that's coming back. But let's look at the create. So out of the box, I have this thing called a validate anti-forgery token. And this just shows you the basis of security, the starting of security. We go in this in depth and detail, is that this means that even though this controller sits on the web listening for requests, it would only take requests from the forms that I've created. So someone else couldn't call this with their own form and try to get around it. They would have to use my app to submit data to this form. So in other words, in order to get over here, they have to use my app to begin with. So I can enforce a lot of things on the front end and also on the back end. So when this information comes over, it's bound to this person model. And at this point, before I added it to the database, you know, I could do some validation checks here if I needed to.
Right. And 17 Hero has it right here. Look, it's like, look how much core setup the tool has done for you without having to write a single line of code. And that
I haven't wrote a single line of code. All I did was describe my database.
And I think that's what impressed me to start off with too. I was like, wow, you guys are like telling me you're doing all this work on these projects, and you're like, you just sit and file a new project. Like,
right. And so it's already doing some checks. It's just to make sure the model state's valid, that the stuff in here, so if this filed, but you could do some other checks in here if you wanted to. You can also enforce data on the in the model itself with annotations and markup. It's a little beyond what we're doing today. But the reason I want to show you today is how fast you can get up and running and why people love this. So like in the enterprise, when we're building enterprise applications, people are people want to know kind of like how fast can you build this? And this tool allows you to build it really quickly. And that's the genius of Visual Studio, and that's why people are doing it. The other thing is Microsoft's working on the tooling, the language, and all the infrastructure in between all this, like entity framework, identity, the route engines, the controller, the base controller this inherits from. All of that is thought out for you before you have to do it. And when you're building out other scenarios, it's up to you as a developer to pull in all of the libraries that you need to make this happen. And that's just the beginning. That's just the tip of the iceberg of the types of things that you can build with Visual Studio. And that's why people like it, because we can build things so fast. But it's not because we can build it fast, Kevin, doesn't mean it's not flexible and powerful. Like you can build some very complex of any type of app with this inside of MVC for sure, or Razor Pages, or even using something else called Web API if you have to have a JavaScript front end. It's built in to do that as well.
Right, definitely,
so,
definitely.
This is why people did. I don't know how long that took. What time is it? So you tell me how long that took. 30 minutes?
40,
did it take 30?
40 minutes.
Huh?
Or 30 minutes.
40 minutes.
So 35, 40 minutes. Well, you were talking
and so
about
like,
it.
Yeah, I was talking about. So what we do is, I think in my my test code when I did this before, just see how long it would take to see if we would be here for 2 hours. I think I typed that up in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I could totally see
maybe 5.
That. Yeah.
You know, without me talking, just Pam, I just did it out. And so like, I think that it shows you the power of like, if you know kind of what you want to build, you already know your kind of your base models, you can put your models in there, you scaffold them, you create your database, and bam, you've got scaffold pages up in the afternoon that you can start collecting data with. The awesome thing about MVC is that now my front end is decoupled from that back end because all of my logic is in the controller. And so I can hand the views off to a designer, and the designer at this point can go in and make it look however they want. You know, so I think that's really important. You can notice here, I was just you saw me where I changed some HTML stuff. So it makes it real easy to create the look and feel that you want. It's got a whole view engine, templating engine in there that's, that's super powerful, super complex, that allows you to build any kind of front end that you want. So that's why people are excited about it.
Let's do some questions and stuff here. So
okay, cool.
Firstly, Restless Tinker said there's a shortcut, by the way. You could have typed this even quicker, apparently. If you type prop and then tab, you can scaffold stuff. So it's like, but like we wanted to show you, like, I guess that part. So like, but yes.
So I want to talk about public int string and getter and setters. Yeah, if I was doing it, it would just do it in like 80 seconds.
So and that's the cool thing about, I mean, with VS Code too, as well. There's lots of cool shortcuts you can use for stuff. You can often find you can use shortcut keys, and then tab will pre-populate a bunch of stuff in these apps. That's super good.
Yeah.
Super good about
it. And so, like, I've actually done that, and just to tell you, Russell, I've done things like that, demonstrating to students, but then it becomes too much magic at that point, and so we need to always back up and go, what are we doing?
Yeah, and then show them the quick way.
Teach them the magic later.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how you can be truly performant.
Yep. So here's something interesting, which Inura says, Visual Studio is great. I wish .NET was cross-platformed. It
is cross-platform, dude. Like it totally is. So .NET Web under .NET 5 will run anywhere. In fact, inside of our bootcamp, we are pushing our .NET projects to Heroku with PostgreSQL. But it's 100% cross-platform, open source, will run anywhere.
It is literally on their front of their web page.
Yes. Do not trust me when I say this. It does not. You're thinking about it in like 7 years ago type Microsoft. Now, for web, cross-platform is a total reality. Can run anywhere. For desktop, what we're seeing now with .NET 6 is cross-platform in terms of Mac OS and Windows OS, so that you can build out your application that will run there. For mobile, we have Xamarin, which will run on iOS and Android and Windows. And soon to be, with the new innovations with that's coming down the pipe for Mac, the M1 chip, those types of scenarios that those Xamarin projects will run on iOS, the Mac OS, and Android and Windows, and that's going to be called .NET 6 MAUI. What's not there for native apps is Linux. I don't think they plan to do that. But Microsoft doesn't plan to do it, but I think there is a project where people are open sourcing .NET and getting it to run locally on a Linux platform. So it's completely open source and cross-platform. So I hope that solves that myth.
We get that myth a lot. We really do. I'm sure Microsoft do as well.
Yep.
Let's see. Oh, we got super chat.
Got a super chat.
Chaco-chan. Thank you, N17.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
So N17 is now at the top of the leaderboard here in recent super chats.
Yeah, he is. Like, where is that? Over here. You can see like up
here.
Yeah,
exactly.
Number one on the board. Where is that? Number one on the board this side. Yes, thank you. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it a lot.
His casual data scientist says, on an older laptop, 2008 HP, a 2008 HP i3 core, a Visual Studio loads super slow. Dude, the browser's got to load super slow on that, surely. I mean,
I would say that you're not wrong. Visual Studio does require a pretty powerful computer to do it. We tell students that RAM is, you need a lot of RAM on it, so you probably need 16 gigs of RAM to use it on a daily basis on your daily. And so VS Code, on the other hand, is more lighter weight and runs quicker and snappier. And you can get an MVC project into VS Code. It's just not out of the box there that you need everything. There's some setup involved, whereas Visual Studio comes in there. But yeah, it does run slowly once you get it up and running. Yeah,
but my point is, anything is going to run slow on that machine. Any modern application. Try Chrome. I bet it kills it, doesn't it?
Yeah. So we're running Visual Studio. We're running ISS Express. We're running the database server in the background, the build. There's a lot of things going on that Visual Studio is doing that your code editor is not doing those kind of things.
Right.
So it's not having to do that. So I don't want you to compare like an MVC project and how it runs in Visual Studio to an HTML, CSS, and pure JavaScript project, because like they're not even comparable. Yeah, VS Code can run those things lightning fast too, but they don't do anything. You don't have to compile it. So there's some work going on behind the scenes to make this work.
I would say, unfortunately, it's probably time to upgrade that machine. We all have to at some point. I'm hanging on to my early 2000s.
It could be RAM more than
Mac.
anything. I would look at RAM before I went away from the i3. So the i3 may be okay. But like definitely I'm running on a MacBook here, but like an i7, i5's definitely a modern i5 would be really good, really fast with 16 gigs of RAM and an SSD. So if you don't have an SSD on that one, that'd be another kind of performance hit it's taken.
Yep, definitely. So let me see. Abhishek wants to know how do you add social log into this? Is that something you can do with this?
It's built in. So it's built in, and so like actually code already stubbed out for it. And we show that in our class too, where we connect our logins to Facebook, LinkedIn, GitHub, Google, whatever you want.
So is that as simple as like
differently?
Is that as simple as like checking a box then, or is that like you got to add code to it? How does that part work?
Yeah, you have to do some stuff on your end to do it, and they're all a little bit different.
Okay.
So it's beyond like a demo of 15 minutes, but absolutely
but it's
100%.
It's something that's there.
It's already done and built out.
You just got to add it.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric has a great question. I love this question. Good question, Eric.
Okay.
Says, do you recommend using this approach when building portfolio projects, or should we rely less on templates?
You should. So this is like, so Eric, you're looking at maybe the front end of it versus like what this thing's actually doing behind the scenes. When you're building a full stack web application with MVC, 1,000%, this is the way it's built in the industry, and it's the way you should build it. The last thing you should do as a developer, I think at this point, is trying to figure out like security, routing, ORM, all of those things, especially as a junior, you should rely on this. Now, the front end can be whatever you want. It just comes with a default template right out of the box, but that's just HTML. And so like you can take a template, make it look cooler. You can do it all yourself with CSS and HTML, but the guts of this full stack part, the database connection, the security and all that kind of stuff, this is how you build it with MVC and .NET and C#. So yeah, you should rely on what this thing is doing and then change your look and feel based on what you know, your skill set, whatever. At the school we use, we'll use a Bootstrap type template to give us that really cool look and feel. The reason it's very minimalist approach in this is because it doesn't want you to have to unbuckle a lot of templating to get to look how you want.
Right.
So I'm going to show something real quick to show Eric's, I think it was one of the guys' question. If you look right here, I'll send this link in here, and this article is about setting up ASP.NET support, logging in via external services, and this is just
link
about
it from
like
the page. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so they know that's a common thing that people ask for then.
Very common.
Yeah.
So you don't have to remember passwords and things like that.
Right.
But I'll put that in the we'll put that in the chat before we leave here.
Cool. Okay, Troy has a question. Troy's question is, how do you use a model with dynamic data? Does that make sense?
So are you taking that the models can kind of shift no matter what? That's what and then that you don't know what the properties are ahead of time.
Okay.
I'd have to like, that's like, so what I think what I'm showing you is if you know your properties ahead of time and you're storing like an address book and you know the structure of that, MVC works really well. If you don't know the structure of what you're doing, you're going to come up with another mechanism to handle those kind of things and store it. So if your store is kind of unstructured, then maybe you're looking at a NoSQL type environment or something like that. It depends on what you're trying to do. And I think that's way more complicated than what we can talk about today.
Right.
You know, but maybe that's something, a demo that I can do later and show you kind of how that would work.
I guess it's the right tool for the right job, right? You got to
figure out what so like you could have like, there's a lot of different ways. And I think if I understand what he's saying is I don't know my properties ahead of time.
Yeah, that's what he's saying right here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So what
that's
I
where
would
you
do,
choose
Troy,
something
is
like a
just
NoSQL.
yeah, or we would come up with another mechanism that we would
Okay.
store it in a relational database with a name value pair type database or something like that.
Okay.
But without getting into too much detail, like how we would do it, I would definitely want to understand like what are we doing, what are we understanding, what are we storing? We don't know the properties ahead of time, but what are we doing?
Right.
So,
Right.
but you
Okay.
definitely could do it.
Ben said his Mac Mini from 2012 i5, but upgraded an SSD and it works almost as good as new. Yeah, if you can do two things to a machine, SSD and RAM, like will make it feel like a brand new machine every time you do that.
Yep.
Like it's just those two things. Going from a mechanical hard drive to a solid state drive is like life changing. It really is. It really is. I remember when I first got my Mac and it had an SSD, and I was like, hold on a minute. This thing doesn't take like a minute to boot. And then my new one, so my new PC has an M2 SSD in it. And that thing, I mean, I'm on this now. This boots in seconds. I mean, from cold boot in seconds. Fast. It's crazy fast. It's like this technology's come a long, long way. Long way. Okay. With that one. I don't know if you know a lot about this from a technical standpoint, but probably wants to know about memory allocation in .NET. Is that one of those like things that I hear about a lot?
No, it's so there's garbage collection. I think that's what he's talking about. Like, but like you don't have to worry about that C# being a managed language as much as you would with an unmanaged language. So that's not a super concern at this point with languages like C#. .NET is the framework of all the methods and libraries and functionality we can use, and then C# builds upon that, and then it's doing its own memory allocations. But there's low-level things that you can get into when you have to worry about that. So,
okay.
I hope that answers your question, Lauren.
Okay. This is the last question I have in here right now. And this is Tanner. Unrelated question. The end. Benefits Windows 10 Pro versus Home.
I'd have to go look it up, but I think one thing is remote desktop.
Virtualization is one too.
Virtualization. So like, so when you're running like builds on like Xamarin projects, would be an instance where you need virtualization or VMDs or virtual machines running inside on the chip. So Pro has that exposed. I think there's a remote desktop feature that's in Pro that's not in Home, or more robust. And there's probably other things too, but that's what I know off the bat.
Yeah, we know the virtualization one because of doing Xamarin stuff, right? So we ran into that before where we realized the students in the class have to have that in order to be able to
run an emulator.
Exactly, to run the emulator, yeah. That's also something you have to turn on a hardware level, isn't it, too? I found that out when I installed Docker on my machine here. It's like, you got to turn, and I'm like, got to do what now? What do I got to do? I got to into the BIOS and turn on like the VMD, and I'm like, what am I doing in here? Like it's a hardware.
That's the whole thing with Docker as well. So like, it's just, if you're coding for a living, Windows 10 Pro is the way to go.
Yep. This is a hardware question. Can you manually swap the SSD in a laptop? Depends on your laptop, but generally, yes.
Yep. You got to reinstall the OS and that kind of stuff. But
it can be kind of a hassle. It depends on how it's set up and what kind of laptop you have.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, you can for most of them. You can still these days in a Mac. I'm not sure. I think you can still. I don't know about a MacBook. I haven't replaced any hardware in a MacBook in a long time because they tend to not like you opening them. I used to.
Yeah.
Back days where you could upgrade the RAM. It's the first thing I would do. I would buy one and just go buy more RAM and shove it in. Now you can't. It's all soldered on the board. Now you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
But you gotta, whatever you buy, and Apple will charge you that Apple Premium for doubling the RAM. It's like $200. Like, kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. Let me see here. MD Nabil, and I hope I got your name correct. Thank you for this. Says, what's the best way to start developing .NET projects on a Linux machine? Is there another?
So you can use VS Code. Would be your probably, that's your code editor, and you have to start there. So
it's not something we really play with, is it?
No, I don't do that much. I just know that VS Code runs on Linux. Visual Studio runs on Mac and on Windows. It doesn't run on Linux at this point.
Okay. N17 Hero has a question then. What are there any limitations of identity? Can it work with things like OAuth 2, etc.?
No. So yeah, you can definitely
They're like competing products, right? Isn't that the kind of the?
No, I mean
like
you can use
similar
OAuth 2 inside it, and then you track your users. If depending on what you're doing. So let's say that you're using like Auth0 or Okta, but you want to keep your users in your own database, but you want to use that for authentication. You can do scenarios like that where
Okay.
you're storing user account data, or you can just abandon the entire thing and just use what he's talking about OAuth 2, like Okta or Auth0 or your own Auth server. So I don't think there's any limitations to identity at this point at all. So, but if you don't want to store all that stuff in the database, you want to do it somewhere else, you can, and you don't have to use it.
Right.
So
right. That's funny. So it's impressive. Just to get a pro to do it. Yeah. If yeah, probably. Take it to like a Best Buy or something. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, just take it somewhere and have it done. It's not going to be an expensive upgrade. The part's going to cost more than the installation, I'm sure. Casual Data Sciences says, do you know if it's worth attaining Microsoft Exam 7483, Programming C# certification, or is it not useful? It's a good question. Or are there other certifications
if you want
you recommend?
I think you would learn, like you'll learn a little bit by passing that exam, but you definitely can use those brain dump sites that can just give you the questions and you can memorize the questions. And so is it useful? It depends on how you learned and how you studied for the exam. Yep. What's really useful, I think, more than that, is building an actual project. You'll learn more building a project than studying for that certification. But the certification may be necessary for you to work at your employer, or your employer wants you to get it, then it becomes necessary. But in the US, I don't think having a cert is going to get you a job necessarily. You can't go out and get it and go, oh, now I'm certified, therefore I'm going to get a job. I don't think that's
right.
the case at all.
I think it's more about kind of what you're going to learn in it, and are you going to learn some helpful things in prepping for the exam or not? Because if you're not and you're just doing,
but at the end of the day, man, most of it is like 50 multiple choice questions about .NET. So it's like
right. So is it really helpful?
But if you want that cert, that MCAT cert, it's kind of cool. I mean, like, it's like a badge of honor. I mean, I haven't set for one in a while just because, and I may be wrong with this, I don't exactly value it. So like I spend more time building things than I would studying for a certification. That's just me.
Right.
But I've had them in the past, and I thought it was kind of cool to get them.
Last question. Restless Tinker wants to know, is it easy to jump back and forth between Visual Studio and VS Code? It must be, because you do it.
I do it all the time. They're open on the same solution file.
Because if it wasn't, you'd be annoyed with it and you wouldn't be doing it. So I know it must work kind of seamlessly.
Yeah. So you just open up the same solution file, and then I'll edit the HTML in VS Code. And then when I'm doing that, I'm opening that up in VS Code. When I'm doing the controller bits, I'm in Visual Studio doing that. I don't know. I just like the, I don't know why they're different, but the syntax stuff for HTML and CSS is just better in VS Code.
Yeah,
maybe I don't have the right plugin in Visual Studio.
Maybe you can make it look like VS Code. I don't know, but it does it does look different.
You just Alt Tab, baby, if you're on Windows, and Control Escape, I guess, on Mac.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to be back on Thursday. What are we today? Tuesday. We're going to be back on Thursday.
Yeah.
We've got another cool topic for Thursday, which we'll talk about just before. We're still finalizing it. One of you guys sent us a tip, and we'll be talking about that. Might be a .NET style video. So we like .NET around here.
And join Discord, and we do have a thing in there. If you want more live coding like this, let us know. We'll do some more. Maybe I can build this address book out further as we go on additional shows, things like that. And maybe that's something we might cover just to give you another flavor of what's going on. But today's show is just to introduce you to the topic and go, okay, if you walk away and go, okay, that's kind of cool, or that's kind of hot, It's like,
Right.
like I think I might want to investigate that. And because the industry is moving forward with .NET, as you'll see, we got some stats around that we'll show on Thursday.
Yep.
So we just want to give you enough information to maybe start on your learning journey, improve your career. But if you already got a career and you've gotten JavaScript or PHP or Python, I get that, man. I totally get it. But the reason I bring this up is just so you can pay attention to it and like maybe spend a weekend messing around with it. The tooling is really good. It really is.
We are 6 members away from 1,000. So as soon as we get those extra 6, I will give away the book to a random person in the Discord.
All right,
and I'm gonna put it in the. I'll put it in the general channel right now too. So yeah. So
if you want in on that, do that now. Also, just give us a like on the video. I don't know how many people are here right now. How many? Just give us a like.
There are 40 something people here right now.
Okay, cool. Give us a like.
We would appreciate it. And
especially
thank you
if you like it, let us know.
Yep, and thank you for the Taco Money and 17 Hero. We always appreciate it.
And 17 Hero, appreciate it, man.
Thank you for becoming a channel member, Florin. We appreciate that too.
All right, thank you.
And we'll be back on Thursday.
See you on Thursday. Good luck. Keep coding, guys. See you later.
See you later.